entitled. And so thank you for that.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
In Michigan, we're really, really fortunate to have a tremendous amount of proximity to a lot of very generous family foundations, independent private foundations. For example, Ford has a family office here. Their main office is in New York City, but they have a Detroit office. Kellogg, McGregor again. Nationally, these will look like Gates, MacArthur. There are tons and tons of these. But while there are so many of we're on the next slide, Asteria. While there are some big names that we all know, the vast majority of these private foundations, these independent private foundations, are really, really small. Also, it's worth noting that a lot of these small family foundations have a tremendous amount, a really high level amount of involvement from family members, and they don't always have staff. And so this is one of the reasons why some of these foundations will only accept applications by invitation only. Locally, you may see the Fisher Foundation. Their family name is on a number of art projects and other initiatives in the city. They are an incredibly generous foundation. And typically, they only accept applications by invitation. Now, there's an exception, right? Occasionally, foundations that only accept applications by invitation will publish public RFPs. So it's just important to, as you're looking at your prospect list, to keep an eye on them because, you know, they meet. We'll get into some of those strategies for getting invited to apply. Corporate foundations, the company sponsored foundations, their funds typically come from their for-profit business. Company foundations usually keep close to the donor company, right? So the Ford Motor Company Fund, their main office is within Ford Motor Company's world headquarters. Sometimes they're separate, independent organizations. They can have their own endowments and their own boards of directors. And when I say Ford, I like to share with folks because it can be a little bit confusing. The Ford Motor Company Fund, which is a company based here in Dearborn, is different from the Ford Foundation, which is a family giving entity based in New York, but with a Detroit office. Operating foundations, these are a little bit different. They may award some grants, but their external giving is typically small compared to the funds used for the foundation's own program. So again, those would be like the hospitals and universities. All right, so number 3, foundations have to give away money. And this is get into some of the clues for how we're finding these opportunities here. A little bit later on, I'm going to show you a tool that I use regularly for prospecting and hunting for these grant opportunities. But foundations have to give away at minimum 5% of their assets. And because of this, and it's tracked by the IRS. So every year, foundations have to report to the IRS who they've given funds to and how much. And the tool that they use to do this is a Form 990 PF, I think, private foundations. And the information in those 990s is a fundraising detective's gold mine. They can be dense to comb through, but fortunately Candid, who helps orchestrate some of these sessions, Candid's made it a whole lot easier to search this information. They've pulled from the 990s, organized it in that foundation directory. It's a giant searchable database for grant researching. Back when I started looking for grants, I don't know if there's anybody on here who goes back that far, but we used to have to go to the library. There was this giant book like this thick. It was blue, and it was onerous, and it was the book that had all of the grants. So I'll show you guys in a little bit the easy new way where technology has helped us out in that. All right, there are a couple of other types of grant makers. I want to bring them up. So corporations, they'll have company-sponsored foundations. Some of them will give direct corporate giving programs through grant making. That's usually administered from within the company. They're not in this case, they're not separate entities, and their annual grants are different every year. They're usually tied to corporate profits. I love corporate giving. It's a little bit different style than traditional foundation giving, but as a whole additional course dedicated to corporate giving. So I'm going to resist the urge to dive too deeply into corporate giving because the strategies are a little bit different. And then next, the grant making public charities.
I have a question.
Yes, Dr. Julia.
Hi, Trish. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for coming back.
Right. So my question is, when you talk about direct corporate giving, could Walmart be used as an example or something like that?
Yes.
Okay.
And so Walmart Corporation, they have the Walton Family Fund. So that's one hunk of it. Walmart has a corporate giving program. Walmart stores also have direct corporate giving programs.
So what do you mean by Walmart stores have direct corporate giving programs?
So I'm not too familiar with their specific ones, but like if your organization is in the footprint of any company that's a big company, if you're near Meijer, Kroger, Amazon warehouse, there's good opportunities for seeking corporate funds from them in a direct giving program. Sometimes it will look like in-kind gifts. Sometimes it will look like volunteer service. Other times it can be small grants to do projects. It really depends on the store. Oftentimes those decisions are made by store managers. But again, I bet I'll see you for my corporate giving session.
Absolutely. I'm glad I asked the question because I only thought it was one arm of Walmart. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so funder motivations. Now that we know what different kinds of foundations there are, how we're going to be, the different kinds of foundations that we're going to be researching, I want to talk about a few of the factors that might motivate them to give. So there's a couple listed here, right? Why the private foundations, corporations, and the public charities might give. But remember, every foundation, oh, look at that. It's blank. What happens if you hit the space bar? Do things start flying in, Asteria?
Mhm.
It might be accidentally animated. So if you can hit the space bar, I think it'll fill in that slide.
Okay, there you go.
Didn't mean to hide the information on anybody.
Oh, that's okay.
And just so the team knows, everybody who's here, I'm not clever enough to know how to animate slides on purpose. So this is just accidental. You hit it 2 more times, I think everything will show up, Asteria.
Okay.
Thank you. So, some of these are listed here, but remember each foundation is going to have different goals, interests, processes. So one of the main reasons we do a lot of research before we even approach a potential funder is to help us as the fund seeking professionals get better at identifying how what we do, what our goals, what our interests are, how they align with the interests, goals, and objectives of the different foundations. So I'm not saying, and I'm very, very clearly not saying, find out what motivates the funder so that you can make up a project or a program that they're interested in. That's mission creep. Don't do it. Stick true to what you do. Make sure you're staying on mission. Make sure that it's supporting your case for support. All right, grant writing. Number 4, it's never about the need of your organization. So this is a big one. Grant seeking is a tremendously competitive process. One RFP that I had a little bit of visibility into recently, they received $12.5 million in applications, projects represented in the applications, but they only had $1.2 million of funding to distribute. And so when you approach your funders, you have to prove to them that you're credible and that you have the capacity to carry out the idea that you're proposing. And you also have to show them that this isn't just that you need money. I mean, they know we need money, right? We always need funds to do the thing that we're trying to do. But our job is to convey that our need is going to serve the people. It's about the impact we're going to make. It's about how the funds that we're seeking are going to change lives, right? So for example, if you're asking for funds to renovate a building or to hire new staff, sometimes we call this capital funding for the building and general operating funds for the staff. Our job is to convey what difference will this building and these staff make in the community? How will it better help us achieve the goal that we're trying to achieve while also supporting the objectives of the foundation partner that we're looking at? All right, so how do we increase credibility? We know what our funders are looking for, right? We know that they want us to be successful and capable, but how do you demonstrate or prove that to a funder? How do we show it?
So Trish, we are running into this problem with funders in regards to our funding history. And one of the steps that we did is that we redid our GuideStar or candid profile. I was actually told by a funder, look, I just saw your profile, it's a mess, you need to update it. And so I immediately took that feedback. It was harsh, but it was right, and updated our candid profile. So that's
I have a slide on that. So if that's not familiar to other folks on here, we'll get into that in a few slides with the candid
Yeah, it's
profile.
on the homepage of our, it's on the homepage of our website. It's the bronze or whatever, and you can click on it and it'll go right to our profile. The other thing, Trish, that we're contemplating in our strategy for funding is partnering with more established organizations that can show they have a deep, diverse funding history. And by partnering with them, we're hoping that we can kind of glean some of their credibility for our programming, as well as showing them as a viable partner who won't be managing the money. We are our own fiduciary, we'll manage the money, but we have this partnership that we're responsible to, so they can add a little bit more weight and heft to our proposal. Does that make sense?
That's a great strategy. It's absolutely a great strategy. It speaks to when you can identify and cultivate those kind of proximity partnerships with other organizations. It's almost like automatic credibility, right? They want to partner with you and you want to partner with them so that you can provide top quality programming, right? And they're not going to do it with an organization that they can't count on. So building credibility is an important part of our work. Sometimes we do it alongside other organizations. Sometimes we do it by just delivering really strong programming, right? So if we keep doing it, however we got our start, whatever funding we had to kick off our project, right? Were we good shepherds of those funds? Did we see the impact that we wanted to see? Is our leader somebody that we want to invest in, right? I think somebody mentioned in the chat, earned media, who sees us, who's talking about us, who recognizes that we are doing good work. Asteria, this one has some other hidden notes. So if you hit the space bar, I think 4 times, 5 times, they'll reveal themselves.
I'm hitting interest and nothing is revealing.
So I think another activity to build credibility is just making sure that we're really clear on what our mission is. Credibility herder is if you approach a funder whose focus area does not align with what you're seeking funds for. So, to be crude, if to use Walmart as an example, and I don't know if this is the case, but if they're committed to, animals, and you call them and say, I have a cancer project, but it's probably not going to increase your credibility. All right, next slide.
Not.
Oh, there's the
I had to
hidden stuff.
click.
We talked through all those. Thank you, Asteria. So we talked about this a little bit earlier. Use your candid profile to demonstrate your credibility. So the candid profile is something that you should claim. If you've filled out a 990, chances are good that you have a profile in Candid. You can claim that profile and use it as a fundraising tool. It's free. It's an easy way to share information about your mission and work with potential donors. By claiming your profile, it forces us as professionals to go through and be like, all right, do I have, on my website, do I have financial information? Do I share my strategy and metrics? Is my program and brand info up to date? Next slide. And so as you complete your profile through Candid, and we'll do a session on this too. It's called Go for the Gold, to help organizations get gold certified. And that's maybe in May or June, Asteria, I don't remember, but register the same way you did for this one. But this is just a quick little overview of the different requirements for the various seals of transparency through Candid. And with each level that you achieve, you can provide more insight into your work and in some cases stand out from other nonprofits. The amount of work that it takes really depends on which seal you're going for. The platinum seal is the highest level seal that you can earn. And in getting that one, you really have to demonstrate how you measure your programs, your progress, how you track results. And the information you have to share there really helps to show funders and potential funders the difference your work is making. All of what's required in these seals for transparency is stuff that we're probably tracking anyway. The reason why some organizations don't do this is one, because they're not aware of the Candid seals of transparency, or two, we're too busy doing the work to talk about the awesome work that we're doing to prove to funders that we're worth investing in. So I would encourage you to have a look at your Candid profile, see what it says about you and your organization, and see if you feel like it aligns. If not, definitely go through the effort to claim the profile, update the information so that it's a good reflection of your work. All right, slight commercial is over. The fifth important takeaway is do your homework. Do not ever approach a grant maker not prepared. When you're talking to a funder, you should know as much as you possibly can about the foundation before you approach them. Number 6, to be really, really effective at funding grants, you have to create an individual strategy for each potential funder and tailor your proposal around who you're approaching and why. You can pull together really great information for this from your case for investment, the work that you've put into preparing previous proposals. That's a great alliteration for today. But remember, each grant will require specific and different and nuanced and just annoyingly enough variation on a theme for you to fill out or for you to share with a potential funder. Also, I like to say on this slide, writing one grant application and sending it to everybody is not a great strategy, right? These are all relationships that you're going to be building. You have to know humans at the organizations. So number 7, you have to find the right match. So who funds the kind of work that I'm doing, right? You have to figure out who's a good match. And you can only do that if you do some research. And research, feels like a big, hairy thing. And it can be. It can also be a great task for a volunteer or a board member to help you research something. Mackenzie Scott is really popular right now. Until very recently, you couldn't approach her for any funding. Her team has recently released a request or a grant making initiative through the Yield Fund, Yield organization. But if you have board members or volunteers that are saying, hey, why don't we get some of that Mackenzie Scott money? You can offer to share with them the portal for Yield's process. And they're very clear, do you qualify, go, no-go opportunities for those funds. And it's a fun way to engage our board members who might think that just because somebody has money that they should give it to you in helping to identify. So I like to engage my board members in research. It's something they can do without having to directly solicit funds. And so when you're doing this research, right, finding this great match, you have to always be thinking, how does my mission, how does what I do match the funding interests of the foundations that we're looking at? And so we want to create meaningful partnerships between our organizations and the grant maker so that together we can help solve the problems, address the issues, and save the world together. So I want to do, Asteria, if you can give me screen sharing
Sure.
Permissions. It's a little scary for me, you guys. I want to show you the foundation directory. How many of you use this as a tool for seeking grants?
Is that
You
Grant
see?
Station you're referring to, Trish?
Foundation Center Foundation directory online.
Oh, okay.
Can you see my screen here? No, you can't because I haven't clicked that yet.
Okay, there you go.
All right. So this is the foundation directory online. That is not. So through this, we can do some quick, this is a whole separate session, but I just want to show you the power of the foundation directory and what you can search for. We can get really targeted with geography and some advanced search and filters. So what needs funding? What did you say? Cancer. So we're going to health, geographic focus, Detroit, population served. You can drill down, right? If you're serving specific age groups, any kind of demographic information. We're just going to keep it pretty broad just for the purpose of this example. Now we're going to see, we don't necessarily need them to be local. I'm not going to include federal funders because to Kathy's point, they can be challenging. So going to give me all sorts of potential funders. I have identified in the foundation directory, I'm gonna shorten this year so it's more recent funders, 2019 to 2023 in research. Just to narrow it a little bit. Still have 23,000 grant makers. That's still too big a pot to go through, but for information's sake, I'm gonna show you the kind of information we can find here. So we'll get a list of funders that give to our search parameters. The more narrow we can get with what we're searching for, the more targeted the information will be that comes back from this. But the Schwab Charitable Fund is one that's been identified that fits some of those criteria. I'm going to dig into this one just a little bit. Schwab, in the past 5 years, what are they funding? Education is their number one. So if I feel like my organization is focused on education, I'm going to keep looking. I also want to see, do they give in my geographic focus? If I get to this part of the research and they're only giving in Texas and California, I'm out, I'm looking for a different funder. We can drill into, for the giving to in Michigan, right? Can I recognize any peers? If I'm in Wayne County, I like to look even further into Wayne County. Oh, look. They give money to Wayne State and the First Presbyterian and Our Lady of Good Counsel and U of D Jesuit. So this is in line with their education giving that we learned a little bit earlier. We can also look at more closely the amount of the grants, right? So they've given 11 grants, 885,000. Some of the clues that I get from that help me to know what size grants I should be seeking from an organization. All right. So that's a really, yes.
So is this software tool free or is this available by way of our relationship with COAC?
Yes, both. Organizations that are gold certified through Candid and have operating budgets of $1 million or less have access for free. COACT, as they're looking at their public reopening, will be having some open office hours where they can share, where you'll be able to come in and search with support from folks at COACT. Additionally, there are some funding information network partners locally. I think Wayne State University is one. So if you can look on Candid's website. There are some in the area where you can go in on site and have access. During COVID, we could access it virtually, which was really nice. But Candid likes folks to be able to search this with a little bit of help and some support, because as you saw, there are lots of layers to searching there. But again, through COACT, there are a couple of support opportunities. As always, if you need additional assistance, reach out to the team. They can connect with me. I love sleuthing for grants. And we can always set up some time to do it together later.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep. All right, Asteria, you want to put your screen back up?
Okay.
When you're looking in the Candid website, by the way, for what these things are called, they call places where you can search the foundation directory online. They call them Funding Information Network Partners, or FINs for short, FIN. All right, we're on a slide that looks like it starts with number 8.
You gotta give me a second.
No worries. So while you are doing this research, you're searching for clues, right? You're looking for information about, has the funder funded organizations like yours? And you can also see how much they typically give. So we just saw high level, some organizations in a dashboard within the foundation directory online, they actually break it out for you. So they'll show you their most typical grant falls within this range. And so that helps us to know when I approach a funder, if, what grant levels I should be looking for. So for example, I don't want to ask somebody for $1 million if the biggest gift they've ever given is $10,000. So we're looking for patterns and information in that. All right, number 9.
We're on 9. Okay.
Know somebody within an organization, but it can certainly help, right? As you're looking, right? We're building relationships. You're trying to get to know folks. It is really hard to get a face-to-face with a funder. Like I mentioned earlier, right? There are so many organizations doing so much good work and only so many humans on the funder side. And they have to make choices about how they spend their time too. So it can be really beneficial to use your contacts to help you get meetings set up or get introductions. So in the foundation directory, they'll list a who's on their board, who's connected to the foundation. I like to share those lists with my volunteers or my board members and my colleagues to see if anybody knows any of them. Because reaching out to those individuals who are associated with the foundation can help increase the likelihood that we're going to be more successful in building those relationships. I also like to see where the funders are spending their time. Are they hosting webinars? Are they participating in webinars? If COACT produces some really amazing content. Additionally, locally, Detroit Philanthropy, they're always hosting webinars and events where funders are in the room. Go there, right? Attend the events that they're a part of. Go to the conferences that they attend. Proximity is part of what we have to do here. All right, and number 10. Oh, thank you, Asteria. All right, so the proposal is not, we're on the slide 10. The proposal is not typically the first thing a foundation wants. You got to look at their websites, right? Do they want an LOI? Do they want a phone call? Do they want an interview? Again, it depends. Every foundation is very different on how they do this, but the point of this slide really is to remind us that when we're approaching funders, we have to know what we're asking for. And so a good practice that I like to use is having my pitch written, right? As crazy as it may sound, to write it out, it's really helpful. I'm pulling that information from my case for support. I'm pulling that information from previous proposals. But if I'm going to reach out with a phone call, which mano a mano is the best way to do this, right? It's the closer to human interaction that you can get with folks, the better. Do not reach out for a phone call if it very specifically on their website says, do not call me, right? That's a sure way to get your foundation on the no-no list. But when you do make that initial outreach, your goal is to really gauge their interest, right? Identify if what you want to ask them for is something they would be interested in funding. They don't want to waste your time and you don't want to waste theirs by putting a proposal, right? It takes a lot of time to gather the information, write the story, just think about the metrics, put it all together. You don't have time to do that for everything that might or might not be a fit. So try to make a phone call. Speaking to somebody is a really important part of building that relationship. Email, I know that can feel safe for a lot of folks, but it's really easy to slide that away, right? Like delete, look at it later. So when you're on a call with the funder, you do get that magic hello or a call back. You'll pick up clues if they're interested, right? They'll probably have some more questions. That's why having your pitch in front of you is really important, especially if you have more than one program. Keeping your matrices straight, keeping your programmatic opportunities straight can be, you don't want to be confused on the call. You want to be the expert that you are. So do not skip writing the summary. Do not skip writing the talking points. It will help keep you brief and succinct. And it will also help you be prepared if you have to leave a voicemail. So before you call, know who you're reaching out to. Oops, was there a question?
Yes.
Hi,
So
Trinity.
I always, hi Trish, thank you for your time again. So I always struggle with this part of like relationship building with funders because I'm trying to be so mindful about like the time I'm taking up, but then also trying to like, you know, pitch our story. So I'm wondering if they're like a recommended, so if we do get like a call, for example, like, would you recommend a certain amount of time that we hold that meeting? Like I've had some meetings that were like 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, and like between each funder, I feel like sometimes their energy or engagement can decrease the longer I have them. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are around that.
I mean, this might sound like a cop-out, but it's really not. It depends. Like there are some program officers that want you to tell them all of the wonderful things you're doing and all the difference that you're making. Some program officers just want to know, do you do a thing like the thing that I do? And can I put you in front of my board of directors? So I would say, first, start with your succinct pitch, right? What do I want? How much do I, or what is my program? How much do I need? And what will it do in the community, right? If you can do that in 90 seconds, you'll get a really good read on whether or not the program officer wants to hear more.
Right.
I'd love to share with you about what we're doing in our community with this thing to do this. It looks like a great fit. Is now a great time? And how much time do you have? I think it's a fair question to ask when we're talking to anybody. Love to share this with you. What can I tell you, right? The more questions we can ask of our funders and potential funders, the more clues we're picking up about whether or not they're a great fit. But that's a good question, right? Like, don't assume you have 45 minutes. Don't assume you have 2 minutes, right? Ask.
Thank you.
All right, so the key takeaways, I want to leave just a few minutes for questions. I think we can get there. The takeaways. You've got some tools now in your toolbox on how to find some grants. I think it's really important to share and remind, I think I said this in the beginning, but needing funding is only one part of the equation. You have to prove that you have a track record of doing the work. You have to prove that you have the capacity to carry out the work. And you have to show funders that you're credible. And so that all of those, coupled with being prepared, knowing who you're talking to, being focused, being intentional, will all help increase the likelihood that you'll get funds from somebody. I think everybody should have the worksheet. If you don't, reach out to COAC. We'll make sure you get it. But I hope that you can take some of what you learned today and put it together for your proposal. I would encourage you, I'm on the homework slide, Asteria. I would encourage you to take some time, describe your program and start your research. Make that list of who you think you want to get funds from and find out more about them. You don't have to know everything about all foundations to approach anyone, right? Like that's going to be, you're going to get analysis paralysis by thinking too hard, too many, too once. Just pick a few and go for it. Like just get started. All right. I love foundations. I love seeking funding. I love the sleuthing part of it. What questions can I answer for folks before we're done? Everybody's such a genius now. No questions.
Do we specifically cover strategies we can employ and only invite parties?
I didn't get the whole question. You cut out a little bit, but did you say, can we
Oh,
explore
I'm sorry. Yeah,
strategies?
I was wondering
or-
if we talked about specific strategies to those invite only grant competition.
Yeah, I mean, those are about relationship building, right?
Relationship,
So
okay.
they're hard, but the more you can learn about them and their grant making, get close to some of the organizations that they're already funding, ask those executive directors and chief development officers for advice. They're tricky, they're hard, and it's because their resources are pretty limited. They're the humans that they have on their team. They usually don't have enough humans to manage the volume that they need to address, but it's getting close. What is this? Say we don't get a grant. What are appropriate and helpful questions to ask after they've sent us a no letter, potentially help our odds for the next round that we ask for funding? It's a really great question. And it depends, right? Some funders will share with you a rubric, right? This is how we score. This is how we will score your application. Review that, make sure you're hitting all of the notes that they're going to be scoring. Oftentimes program officers will share their rubric with you afterwards if you ask for it. Sometimes no is just no, right? Sometimes it's not because your program wasn't the right fit. It's just because there's not enough money to do all of the amazing work that's happening in our community. But I like the question because I always like to see if I can get more information from my potential funders about what it was that would make, what it is that could make me more competitive. Sometimes the answer might just be find me more dollars to give away. But other times you can get very specific clues, right? Like your years of operation, not enough. We don't want to be the biggest funder you have. Okay, right? You can pick up clues. And there's just a couple of ideas. Has anybody on here had good success in reaching out to a funder to get more information about why you got to know? And while folks are thinking about that, maybe sharing, Asteria, Diane asked for the last 2 recordings to be emailed to her. I think those are available online on COAC's website.
Okay, I don't know if Mobile has put them up on the website yet, but I will.
But Diane, I see your question. We'll look and see if they're available, but certainly can email them to you. I see somebody's hand.
Hi, yes, my name's Kiera.
Hi, Kiera. I lost where you were. Thank you.
That's okay. How's everybody doing? I hope everyone's doing well. So I did have the opportunity to reach out to a committee, the grant committee, and inquired on some of the reasons why I did not get the grant. They took a very long time to finally respond back. I was very proactive and continuously kept reaching out. And they finally did. I guess they were probably getting tired of me, but hey, I did get the answers. And I did apply again, and actually speaking with them, they realized some of the changes that they needed to make within their system, which included one of the questions asked, how do you monitor your success? And so I explained that I monitor it by, having parents send letters out, and that's not exactly what they were looking for. They wanted surveys, but it didn't specify that they wanted surveys. So they did change that question on the new grant application, and also one of the questions they asked was what percentage of the budget are they asking for? And so I asked for a higher percentage, a high percentage, but they don't want to fund majority of your program, but they didn't indicate that either. So I was like, well, I wouldn't know not to ask for that much if you didn't say it. So they definitely made some changes to it. I applied again and I'm waiting and hoping for an approval this time.
Excellent. Great example of being the squeaky wheel and getting the funding, right? When we know better, we can do better. So you knew how to better answer their questions. You listened and responded. Really good example. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Kara. Alexis.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
So I did have an opportunity to meet with some funders to discuss why my application was not accepted. And it actually was a great meeting because one of the things that our application was missing was like solid input from the community, like that community buy-in component was missing for us. And they gave some really interesting ways. So they talked about maybe hosting like a community dinner and, you know, explaining the project that we got going on in the community and how it benefit and just get, you know, people to maybe sign off or, you know, just kind of retain like what does the community think about the project, you know? But also one of the things I found difficult from that is that it didn't actually mention having community input at the onset of the application process. So it was kind of hard for me to know that that was something that they wanted.
Yeah.
Also, and I guess there's no like cookie cut way of applying to, you know, any of these grants. And I keep trying to like to put everything into one box. And I feel like that's where I'm coming up short at. Sometimes I'm thinking I need to focus more on having like solid numbers for like the budget and all of that and making sure that I really, you know, show them like all those solid like accounting things. And then they just want to hear about like the work that you're doing. And then on the flip side, it's like completely opposite. So that's still
It
one of the
depends.
things I'm kind of, yeah, it
Yeah.
really does.
It
Yeah.
does. I mean, there are some foundations right now that are like, send me a 5-minute video and tell me why your work is so awesome.
Right.
Like,
Right.
right. So it really does depend. The more you know, the better you can do. And I thank you for sharing that story because it's a good point that knowing how our funders are going to be looking at our work and our credibility, that what you talked about just now is credibility. Does the community in which I serve want me to do this thing? Right? As Detroiters, right? People will come to my neighborhood all the time and be like, we're going to build a park. I don't want your park. I just need you to take care of the street lights and pick up my trash. Right. So it's important to talk to our communities to know what they want so that we can address those needs. Christy, I see your question. Do they all focus on the candid ratings and how much? No. Some of them don't even know to look there. But I do like to suggest that organizations go through the candid process anyway, because obtaining a seal of transparency is it's going to put you through the process of making sure that you're ready for a lot of things, right? So when you go through the checklists of how to get bronze, gold, platinum certified, they're just all really good practices for us to have as organizations. Some funders won't look at candid for the seals of transparency anyway. They're going to ask you for a lot of the things in the grant proposal. They're going to look for your budget. They're going to want your board of directors. They're going to want some audited financials, They're going to put that into the proposal. But some funders, and I'm talking about more often than not, the smaller family offices may go looking for potential organizations to fund. It's very rare that I get a call out of the blue saying, hey, Trish, I want to give your organization $25,000 because I found you on Candid, but it does happen. So get there, get that, do that. It's good practice. I know we're running a little bit over. I'm okay to stay for another few minutes if anybody has any questions. But otherwise, I hope you will join us for our next session in May. We're going to be talking about how to build those program budgets or those project budgets and how to share that information with our funders. please do the survey. Thanks, everybody.